Louise Upston.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It really is a pleasure to rise and speak in the budget debate today. Just Thursday last week, the 6th budget delivered by the Minister of Finance, the Honourable Bill English, and judging by not my personal views, but the views of the people I represent in the Taupo electorate, and actually wider than that across the Waikato, the feedback has been absolutely phenomenal. And it's really interesting, Mr Speaker, because the word that comes up time and time and time again is this very much and very clearly is a budget aimed at families. Now, what have we heard from the other side? Well, the other side has been talking, the Speaker immediately preceding me talked about housing. And they have this myth about housing. I just want to put two stats on the table. First, Mr Speaker, is if you look at the rise in house prices, under their 9 years in office, 96% was the increase in the average house price. In our term of office, it's been 22. 96% compared to 22%. So I'm not quite sure, Mr Speaker, why that side of the House goes on and on and on and on about housing, when actually they had many opportunities and did nothing. The other one, Mr Speaker, is interest rates. During our time of office, we have seen interest rates the lowest they have been in 50 years. And that is one of the biggest costs that contributes to housing. So I just wanted to start by refuting some of the comments by the Speaker before me. But actually, Mr Speaker, I want to focus my attention on the things that matter to New Zealanders. The comments that have been coming back to me over the last few days, when literally only a few days in since the budget is out there, but it is absolutely amazing how many people have come up and commented on how pleased they are, particularly the $500,000 that's gone into families. And, few little cynical barbs across the House. Well, actually, let's talk about the real issues. Because at the Women's Expo in Hamilton, which actually used to be a Labour heartland, I have to tell you, the feedback at the Women's Expo in Hamilton on the weekend, Mr Speaker, was absolutely amazing. The people that lined up to get information from the National Party MPs that were there, and there were many of us there over the weekend, and Ms Maroney doesn't like the fact some of us were there for hours on end, and yes, we were listening to the comments of the people of Hamilton, of the women in particular of the Waikato. And I tell you, the thing that they talked about more and more and more than any other issue was our announcements about families. Our announcements about families, about the fact that we have got free GPs and prescriptions for children under 13. Because I can tell you, when I sit in my electorate office in places like Tukuroa and talk to families and talk to constituents, they don't want to have to think twice about whether or not they can afford to take their children to the doctor. And with this budget, Mr Speaker, we solved that issue for them. We've got a fantastically upgraded medical facility, an integrated health centre in Tukuroa. But actually, Mr Speaker, we want them going to the GPs instead of ending up in the hospital or having issues so severe, like we've got high incidence of rheumatic fever. We actually want those issues addressed by a GP, by an early visit to a GP, rather than having a parent of a child think, can I afford to take my child to the doctor today? So, Mr Speaker, that's the feedback that's come from on the ground that I think we should be enormously pleased with. Also, the issues that got quite a good airing last week around our 4 weeks of extra paid parental leave, our increases and changes and extensions to the parental tax credit. But the thing we haven't talked about a lot so far is this extra support for vulnerable children. Because again, this side of the House has put an enormous amount of work into actually trying to solve and deal with just the most difficult issues with some of our families. So far from what the other side would accuse us of, actually we are tackling, with Minister Paula Bennett, we are tackling the hardest end with some of the most vulnerable families. So there's $33.4 million extra into supporting these vulnerable children with these children's teams. We've got 8 additional ones, and they are intensive, they are wraparound, they are working with children in a way that no other government has had the foresight, really. I was thinking of other words to use, and there's words that you're not allowed to use in this House, so I won't use them. But it is so intensive. And these are the teams that are working with the most vulnerable children. So when that side of the House tosses out phrases about children living in poverty, this side of the House is actually putting money into it and doing something about it. Oh, but they can't cope with that. And another significant area of investment is, of course, education. Mr. Speaker, there's been many times that I've spoken in this House about the importance of education. So it's fantastic that this year's budget again has put more money into education, investing more in education. And one of the areas in particular is early childhood education. And again, unlike any other government before us, we've actually set targets. We've set targets, better public service targets, that we allow the public to basically measure our performance on. And if we have a conversation around early childhood education and participation, we've said 98% of children, because that's right, Mr. Speaker, you talk to any teacher in any classroom, particularly those who teach new entrants, and they say the biggest difference in their classrooms is having a higher number of 5- and 6-year-olds who have participated in early childhood education. So if we can get them onto an equal footing at the start, then they've got the best opportunity of doing well. So one of the other, actually there are a couple of people on Sunday afternoon that were early childhood education teachers. And of course they were thrilled at this announcement, absolutely delighted that this money is going into centres, $155.7 million invested directly into early childhood education centres. So no, we don't just set these targets, we look at what is needed to achieve those targets, where do we need to put the focus, and what do we need to do to make sure that we are lifting our early childhood participation rates. I want to give you another example, Mr. Speaker, of where this government has set a target, we've allowed ourselves to be measured on something, and then actually to look at where the investment in this budget that is so focused on families backs that up. And the example that I want to give, Mr. Speaker, is on NCEA Level 2 and our achievement target of 85%. Because it's fair to say that some of the schools, from one end of the electorate of Taupo to the other, have had quite a gap to achieving that level. Quite a gap. One school, for example, though, in 2003 was on 28% NCEA Level 2. Now, Mr. Speaker, they're on 93. That is a massive achievement for their students, and they are focused on that 100%, and that's what's doing it. So when you talk to schools around the electorate about the additional $284 million for schools, classrooms and improvements to school properties, putting more money into home computers for digital literacy for those very same low-income families, and this is actually a Decile 2 school I'm talking about. I'm not talking about a 5, 6, 7 or 8, I'm talking about a Decile 2 school that's had significant achievement from 28% to 93%. And yes, high Māori and Pacifica students who are achieving, who are doing outstandingly well in their results in Tokoroa. So Tokoroa High School is just an absolute standout. They know that we are investing, that this government is investing in the things that matter to them, and they are focusing on lifting achievement for each and every one of their students. And man, they are getting the results. They are having stunning results. Another thing, Mr. Speaker, that hasn't had a lot of attention so far that really does make a difference to New Zealand families is the investment that we're putting into cancer services, an additional $33 million. Now, only a month ago, Mr. Speaker, another of my family members, and I have said another very deliberately, as I'm sure many members in this House have had direct family members diagnosed with cancer. The thing that you want to know is that your family members are able to be treated quickly and swiftly. First of all, that they get the diagnosis and then they get the treatment they need. So, Mr Speaker, another $33 million this side of the House is putting money where New Zealand families want it. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
I call the honourable member, Maturia Ture. Tēnā koe, Ms Ture.
Tēnā koe.